See.
Okay, do we just wait to see how many people get on first?
Good afternoon, Jamila. We are officially live. I want to firstly greet everyone that is joining us today. We will be talking about shifting from being in a grudge state, a state of resentment, angst, anguish, you name it, to grit, grace, and gratitude. For those that are joining us live, we're happy to have you with us. Please ask questions and don't hesitate to engage. And for those that are joining us afterwards to watch the replay, don't also hesitate to pose your questions, post it in whichever platform. And we've got good news today. We actually are streaming across 3 platforms, not just LinkedIn. We're doing LinkedIn, we're doing Facebook, as well as YouTube. So bear with us if there are any technological challenges. It's the very first time we're streaming across the 3 platforms today. And so let me introduce you to an inspiring, phenomenal woman, Jamila Kasim, who will be my co-host on this segment. And I am just so ecstatic to be walking this journey with her and delving in these conversations. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to her to introduce herself and share a bit about why we are doing this. Over to you.
Thank you, Anissa. Thank you so much for that lovely welcome. And I'm excited as well, to get onto this program that we've discussed, where we'll take a 12-week journey and speak about different experiences and topics that we go through on a daily, and share with like-minded people. So I'm Jamila Kasim. I am a life coach, and I have a background in marketing and media, but I think I found my calling with coaching and with just being inspired to go on this journey of self-discovery. And I'm not sure whether it's just this time or phase of my life, but I feel compelled to dig deeper and to live the best life that I can live, and learn as much as I can about myself, about my experiences, the reasons why I behave the way that I do, and just to question a lot more about the inherent behaviors that we have adopted as we've gone along. And I think it's just a journey of self-discovery, like I said, which is such an exciting one to go through. And just having these discussions with you, Anissa, we've come to realize that there's so many of us that are going through this right now. And we've gone through experiences in our lives, which have been challenging and rewarding. And, we go through our ups and downs, but I think it's important for us to sit back and reflect as to why we behave the way we do, and how we can go about the journey going forward from a more informed perspective, so that we can appreciate it and live it within our true authenticity. So I think that's how this was born, and this began. And I think that this discussion that we should be having right now will be somewhat of sharing our experiences of what we've gone through, with milestone events in our lives, and how we've managed to overcome and learn and become stronger from the challenges, and from the successes as well.
Jamila, spot on. I think just for some context for those that do know me, I am a coaching alchemist. Like Jamila, we are passionately inspired to drive transformation, personal transformation for others, and equally in ourselves, because we can't drive transformation for others if we don't constantly work on ourselves. So I'm just putting that caveat out there. And as you rightfully say, we have had many life experiences that have shaped who we are today And that has ultimately brought us to this point of saying, well, okay, how do we pay it forward? How do we share our stories so that people can connect? And when I saw Jamila's courage and bravery sharing online about her, I call it conscious uncoupling, but let's call it what it's called, the divorce, and what that milestone, life-changing experience was for her. We kind of connected in that way. And I mean, she is an authentic human. What you see is what you get with her. So I reached out to her and I said, I think we need to be talking more about this. Make people aware that it's not taboo to go through these difficult dark nights of the soul experiences. And we need to raise awareness and provoke these conversations and evoke the emotions that come from it, because we almost shame and shy away from it. And so this platform, whilst we will be talking today about our own lived experiences, it's not just for us. We want to extend this to others as well. So without further ado, we're going to delve in to some of the conversations shortly, and the theme being grit, grace, and gratitude. We'll start off there, right? And I'm just adding a question to the screen there. How do you define grit in your own life, Jamila? And can you share an example of a situation where your grit was put to the test, be it the divorce or any other one?
I think before I answered that, I just like for whoever is listening today to understand that yes, the two of us are here to speak about our experiences as women going through this, but it by no means that it is limited to just the female experience.
Yes.
There are
Yes.
just as many men that are going through these challenges in their lives. And I think it's important for us to be inclusive and to touch on the experiences that they have as well, because I think that they can be quite similar. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I just like to put that out there, that this is something that we all go through. To answer your question,
Jamila,
Anissa.
so sorry to interject there. I just want to thank you for raising that, because this is not about the rise of the divine feminine and we're forgetting we all have duality, feminine and masculine within across all of us. So you're rightfully saying that it's not limited to just a female grieving through these processes and challenges in our lives. Let's raise
Yes,
awareness for men who generally don't speak about these things. And let's
yes,
invite them to the table to have not just a seat, but a voice as well. So thank you for
correct,
raising that.
correct. Okay, so in terms of grit and challenging experiences that we go through in life, I mean, there's so many that we encounter, on the daily throughout our life expanse and experience. For me, I wonder if I should just give a little bit of a background of how I've come to this point in my life. So maybe a
Sure.
little bit of history. Um, I was married into a very Orthodox Muslim family, and totally different to the upbringing that I had, which was largely, I have to attribute to my mum, who was absolutely a force to be reckoned with. I think she was a trailblazer, a rebel for her times. Coming from a Muslim background, she married someone who came from the Christian faith. And, I'm looking like about, gosh, 50, 60 years ago, that was almost unheard of.
Mm.
And, I think now back to what her life must have been like. And I realized the strength that she must have had as a woman going through, going against the grain of what the norms were and the taboos were of the time. And so I lived a very liberal life, and I think that's mainly due to my mum. And we grew up not seeing color, not seeing race, not seeing religion. And unfortunately, I lost her at a very young age. And came to a very rude awakening in that that liberal lifestyle was purely driven by her. And long story short, I was then pushed into an arranged marriage, and very, very Orthodox Muslim family. Women were meant to be not even seen and not even heard. You know, your place was in the kitchen.
Yeah.
All you would do is cook and clean and take care of the kids. And for fun, you would bake. So,
Gosh,
yeah.
it's bizarre, right?
It's absolutely bizarre. And as a result, you know, you are like placed in the situation almost where you are put into a cocoon, you know, where you are not encouraged to have friends, not encouraged to be sociable at all. My father-in-law, before I got married, said, understand one thing, no daughter-in-law of mine will study, no daughter-in-law of mine will work. And I realized years later that that was actually a form of control, you know, so
Sure.
that you would always be dependent. Um, so this was my life for about 10 years until I realized that, you know, I didn't want my son to be brought up in that same, with that same mindset. And I took the decision to divorce. At the time, I had no education behind me. I quietly did an online computer course, you know, just a basic computer course, which held me a fait to Word and PowerPoint and Excel. And I quietly, I applied for a job. And by the grace of God alone, I managed to find a job. And once I did that, I knew that I would be independent. I wouldn't have to depend on anyone or go back home. And I would be able to sustain a living for my son and myself.
Sure.
And that was the beginning of my journey, you know. And my life after the divorce was not easy by any means, but it was my life. It was my freedom that I achieved. I could make the decisions that I wanted to. I could choose to have friends if I wanted to. I could bring my son up the way that I wanted to. And that was my mission. My mission was to work as hard as I could to be able to give my son the privileges that I knew that he deserved, to give him the lifestyle and the open-mindedness that my mom would have wanted for him. And so that was my life. You know, it just became about work and my son. And like I said, it was challenging to say the least.
Yeah.
But you realize that through these challenges, it uncovers the immense strength that you have, and the immense indomitable spirit of every human being. When you have a goal
Absolutely.
in mind and you set out to do anything that you can to achieve it, you can most certainly be guaranteed of success. So
Yeah.
I think that grit of going through the divorce, but always keeping in mind what my ambition was, what my goals were, what the end goal was. It allowed me to have the resilience, you know, that I quite needed at that point to be able to make a success. And, you know, today my son is grown. I managed to put him through a private school, give him a private school education, put him through university. And he's a successful young man today with an open mind, a kind heart. And I couldn't have asked for more than that. That
Thank
made
you
the
so much.
journey, yeah, that made the journey totally, totally worthwhile for me.
Jamila, thank you so much for sharing that. I just want to acknowledge, I think it's pronounced Idle Van Martins. Thank you so much for your kind acknowledgement regarding the show being excellent. We appreciate that comment. Thank you for being here. So, just to get back to your story, Jamila, I think that in the midst of that, orthodox environment and the reality of you need to be a stay at home and not be seen, not be heard, it took a lot of courage for you to be able to study on the side. And would you then describe that being the grit? How did you do that? What were the excuses? I'm keen to share with the audience. How did you go
Yeah.
from no education to working yourself up? I mean, what strategies, let's move into the next part. What strategies or mindset shifts helped you maintain that resilience in the face of
You
those challenges?
I think that at the time I just knew that I needed to get out. 10 years had gone by in a flash, and that was 10 years of my prime time in my life. And I
Sure.
realized one day that another 10 years could that just as easily go by. And what would I have to show for it at the end of it?
Mm,
My son in another 10 years would have been 16 at the time. How would I have sat down and authentically and truly and genuinely said to him that, I lived my best life. I lived my life with conviction and honesty and authenticity. And I couldn't answer those questions. Um, so I decided, I think, that my next move was to make sure that I got out. And the only way that I would be able to get out was to have some sort of a qualification behind me. It was not easy for me to study. I had to do it quietly and I secretively. And so when I dropped my son off at school, I would go to the library, and I
mm,
would look at online courses and what could I do that was cheap and or even free at the time because I didn't have access to my own money.
sure.
And I found it. And while my son was at school, and in that little time period that I had before I had to be back home, because I couldn't be home out of the house indefinitely, I managed to do a part-time course. Once I received my qualification for that, I actually met a lady who is still a friend of mine till today at the course, and she said to me, what are you doing, what can I help you with? And she helped me to put together a CV, basic CV. And she said to me, if anything does come up at my place of work, I will let you know. And true to her word, she messaged me a month later and she said, there's a position coming up. It's not it's a very, very junior position. It's actually an assistant administrative clerk. And this is the link. Please apply for it, which I did. I
Mm,
went in remembering this year, and I'll never forget it. I went in for my interview petrified because at this point, you must remember that I didn't really have much contact with the opposite gender. In the family environment that we were in, we were closed to the females only. We would hardly ever
yes.
interact with any of the males. And I was petrified to go in for the interview because I thought, what if there are any males? How would I be able
Oh,
to
wow.
converse? What would I do? So I was so
Yeah.
nervous.
And
And I
Jamila,
walked.
was there any feeling like besides the opposite side that you're not used to being in their space, but did you feel like, hey, am I going to come up as a fraud here? Am I an imposter? Are they going
Absolutely.
to see through me?
Absolutely. 100% imposter syndrome for sure. I mean, I felt like I was such a fraud, such a fake. I had no business being there. This was not
Yes.
my domain. I was not, qualified to be there. But nonetheless, I walk in and lo and behold, it was a room full of men with one woman interviewing me.
Wow.
And I just said to myself, girl, you know what? This is time for your alter ego to come out. And I called upon her and I
Love
went
it.
in there, answered the questions to the best of my ability. The interview didn't last very long. I walked out. A friend of mine had given me a lift there and she was kind enough to wait for me. And she was like, what, is it over so quickly? And I said, yes, I don't think I got it. I mean, who was I trying to fool? I mean, this is never going to come. I'm never going to find a job. And I went home quite despondent that day. I was very sad and just I wasn't, I was just so disillusioned. And I prayed to God and I said, you know, please, I need to get out of this. I have to send me some sign. And the next day I got a call from the HR manager and she said, Jamila, we're offering you the job. And that was my first job. And I remember that it was a salary of 3,000 Rand a month. And I was beside myself. I was ecstatic because this was now my passport, you know, to be able to say to everyone that I've had it, I'm out. And
Yes,
people
yes.
thought at the time that I was going through a midlife crisis, that I was having a nervous breakdown. I remember a brother-in-law of mine said to me, snap back into who you truly are. Snap back,
Wow.
this is enough. You've had your tantrum. It's time to get back to reality. And I don't want to hear any of this nonsense of divorce. It's not going to happen. And, you know, that just encouraged me all the more to realize that I was making the right decision. And I left. I left with my son and the clothes that we had and nothing else. And it
But
was
Jamila,
difficult.
what I'm getting a sense of, right?
Mm.
And before I continue, I see there's some comments. Ashif from Canada, thank you so much for joining us. When shift happens, you matter. He says, thank you for your unwavering support always on the lives. We appreciate you. But coming back to this experience and the journey to date and what the driving, influencing factors were, one, you walked by faith because it sounds like there was an element of prayer, asking. So there was an element of how do I give myself grace in this context? Then
Yes.
there was also, you said something about goals, and I'm a bit of a maverick coach. I don't like the word goals, so I reframe it to say purpose. There was a very
Mm-hmm.
clear purpose and
Mm-hmm.
intentionality to live life by a different design than what was dictated in this marriage for you. And then there was also
Correct.
very clearly defined values. You were not in your truth at the time in that marriage, and you were small, you were kind of the small person made to be small and not like you belonged. And I suppose those were all the driving factors that led up to this decision to say no more. But
Mm.
how did you in what ways did you incorporate this grace in your daily interaction with yourself and others, knowing that this was the journey you're heading towards?
Um, you know, in terms of the grace, I think what I needed to acknowledge was also that the 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 10 years that I had experienced in the marriage was something that I had to go through for many, many years. You know, I would say, and I would have conversations with God and say, why? Why me? Why do I have to have this life? And I realized that, you know, I had to go through this experience so that, and there was a bigger purpose to it, so that I would be in a position to be able to help others who were in a similar situation that I was in. And I remember when I left my marriage, I made an intention that if I was able to help just one woman go through this, or one man for that matter, you know, go
Mm-hmm.
through this experience by understanding that you're not being selfish by making this decision to move on, to end
Yeah.
the marriage. If I was just in a position to be able to help, even if I was just as a listening ear, a compassionate ear for someone, it would have made things so much easier for me if I had that in my life. It would have diminished a lot of doubt that I had in myself, you know, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
self criticism that I was being selfish, a lot of guilt. And I think maybe, and I do believe that everything does happen in its time, but maybe it would have helped me save some years, you know, to be able to make the decision earlier,
Sure.
and to go on to this journey a lot earlier. But one thing I realized, Anissa, is that you have to be graceful in understanding that we are placed and we follow a path that is already predestined for us. And as much as many people would like to blame maybe my in-laws or my ex-husband or whatever the case may be, but I think that we are all doing the best that we can, the best of our abilities at the time when we are going through it, with the knowledge that we have, with the tools that we have available to us, and with the consciousness that we are vibrating at. So I think it's very important for us to acknowledge this and to understand this and to accept it and to get rid of blame,
Yes,
because it's easy to
yes,
play the blame game and to play the victim in all of this.
yeah,
So for me, the grace is to choose to go through this without looking at myself as a victim, but by looking at myself as going through this, how best to get the most positive out of that experience, how
sure.
best to learn from it, and to be able to help someone else who's in a similar situation.
So, Jamila, I mean, I love that Ashif is always so interactive and engaging. He raises something around feel the freedom within first, which talks to what you're referring to now. You know, unless you let go of ego, resentment, pain, shame, and guilt. And just for the audience, the reason why there was so much resonance for me to connect with Jamila, I think it's 2.5 years now for me when I've consciously uncoupled from my partner. And that was an 18-year marriage and a 23-year relationship. It was the hardest thing for me to give up that marriage because it wasn't that I didn't love my partner. In fact, I loved him dearly, right? But I knew that what was mirroring for me in that relationship, I was a complete rescuer, savior, people pleaser. And let's face it, that response in us comes from a place of trauma. You described your mom, Jamila, so beautifully, like a powerhouse, a matriarch that took things on and just ran with it, which gave you the grit, right, that you needed to make some of your decisions to move forward, to propel you forward. In my case, I didn't grow up with my mom, or I also don't know my dad. And the reality was, I was seeking for love, belonging, and acceptance, and was totally smothered and intoxicated in the marriage because I was getting that. And I wasn't showing up in my truth because I was pleasing everyone because I wanted to keep the peace. And that in and of itself is not ideal for a relationship to flourish because, and I don't want to label because, you know, we call ourselves empaths and we label people as narcissists, but let's be very clear that each and every person has got narcissistic traits, personality traits. And we've all been triggered and played victim and felt like the world owes us something. And everything was happening to us. But where we shift from grit to grace and gratitude is what you so beautifully articulated. How is this experience meant to serve me? Right? What is the mirror in this relationship of this marriage or the in-laws that they are teaching me to shift the narrative, change the story, and to stop sabotaging ourselves because we feel like we need to belong. Because our greatest need as
Correct.
humans is to feel like we belong to a tribe, to something. And that's where we forget to give ourselves grace and say, hold on, I cannot be all things to everyone. And what am I then modeling for my kids?
Mm,
What am I modeling for my two sons who sees a
mm,
mom being a matriarch of her family and, so to speak, wearing the pants in the household? So my decision came about where I was like, hold on, I'm going to need to do this and I'm going to need to do this consciously with no ego, no blame, no shame, and just walk away so that I could start over with grace for the person. That's why I called it consciously uncoupling, but also for myself. Fast forward today, it is very, very difficult to co parent. And I find that I am now once again being challenged in my consciousness to say, how do I stay grounded and not be triggered? How do I make sure that I continuously stay within grace and within gratitude on how the experiences are serving me? So I'm sharing that because I want you to share with the audience, how did you balance assertiveness with grace in challenging conversations or situations? Because it's difficult when you're being triggered. Before you go, I think there's another comment before you respond. I'd like to acknowledge everyone. Well, Shida, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you joining us today. So let's get back to that question. Assertiveness with grace. I love that you brought this question in because the two almost feel like they don't go hand in hand, right? Jamila, are you there? Jamila, I hope we haven't lost Jamila. Let me see if I can send a private chat. For those that are still here, please engage us. I mean, share your stories. I see that. Are you back, Jamila?
Yeah, it's absolutely very difficult. And
sorry, you were gone for a while, Jamila, and I don't know if it was on my side or if it was your side. I will just acknowledge Ashif's last comment. Solutions do come. Okay, I see we're losing her. She might have lost connection. But in the interim, I'll read Ashif's comment. Solutions do come for mutuality regardless. Being humble with pride displaces ego, I believe. So whilst we're waiting for Jamila to come back and join us, please do share some of your stories. How did you balance assertiveness with grace? Because it feels like a bit of a contradiction. You need to assert yourself, you need to have boundaries. I see she's back. Let me just get her back into the studio. Okay.
okay,
Are you back,
not
Jamila?
sure. I'm back. I'm not sure what happened. Yeah, we seem to have lost connectivity there.
That's all good. You know, technology is not infallible, and this in and of itself is how we have grit in our lives, right? We just
Yeah,
persevere
correct.
amidst the craziness.
You were mentioning that someone had a comment or a question.
I did read it. I did read it. I'll read it again for you.
Can you
He
repeat? Yeah,
commented,
please.
Ashley, he said, solutions do come from mutuality regardless. Being humble with pride displaces ego, I believe, and which is great because how do you balance between asserting yourself, establishing boundaries, but yet still having grace for yourself and the, in inverted commas, perpetrator that has hurt you or harmed you?
Yeah, I think we need to acknowledge first and foremost, that we grow up in a society which considers success outside of yourself, in everything that is outside of yourself. You're successful if you're a good mother. You're successful if you're a good wife. You're successful if you're a good daughter-in-law. Nobody celebrates success because maybe Jamila is a good paddle player, or maybe Jamila is someone who loves reading books. That is not seen as successful. It's always seen to be attached to something that you can do for somebody else. So I think acknowledging and accepting and empowering yourself with knowing that you are important is step one. I need to be so proud of myself. I need to put myself first to understand that it's owed to me to be the best self. It's owed to me to be able to go out and gym every day, or to go out and run every day. And I think it's important to go onto this mindfulness journey. where
Yes.
you are mindful of what it is that you are owed by yourself. So for me, mind, body, and soul, I need to put myself first to be able to be the best mother that I can be. But I have to first be the best Jamila that I can be. I
Mm-hmm.
have to make sure that I strengthen myself when it comes to mindfulness, when it comes to meditation, when it comes to, educating myself, to learning more about what it is that I do, or the profession that I have. And if I put this at the forefront, then I think it allows me to appreciate who I am. And by appreciating that, I then will be able to have so much better relationships with the people that are around me.
Mm-hmm.
But first and foremost, I think it's so important, Anisa, for us to put ourselves first. And to put ourselves first and to strengthen ourselves, for me, being in a mindful state, being in a meditative state every day, making sure that's part of my routine, helps me to raise my energetic levels so that I can then, you know, be a better mother to my son. I can be inspirational towards him. I can live in my own truth. And for him to see that, you know what, this is how my mom lives her life. And I aspire to be that way as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
So
you hit
I
the
think a
nail on
lot
the
of
head.
people put everyone first. As you say, you people please. And that for me is the biggest tragedy that you can ever, put onto yourself. So if we are able to just place ourselves first and remove all the guilt, all the ideas of you being selfish by doing that, if we can just diminish those ideas and beliefs that we have been bombarded with as we grow up, so that it becomes a part of our behavior, it becomes a part of the patterns that we are so used to living through. I think that makes such a big, huge difference, and allows you to move forward and make the decisions that are necessary for you to assert yourself going forward to achieve that success. But
Mm-hmm.
by doing so as the strongest person that you can be. And if you are, if that's how you vibrate towards everyone else, then I don't think that you can have any undue, unnecessary negative conflict. I know that you have to have
True.
conflict in life, that's just a necessity, it's normal, it's part of our day to day, but you can deal with it in a positive way and you can deal with it in a negative way. And also, by being that, coming from that sort of a mindset, you can make these decisions, you can have these interactions with other people from a very, very positive point of view.
So to speak to that, I think in the first part of our segment, we spoke about grit. And there we would need to be embodying radical
Can you hear me,
resilience.
Anisa?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Jamila, can you hear me? Okay, so while we're trying to get Jamila back, I just want to respond to that. In the context of grit, we need to embody almost radical resilience. So how do we stay above the noise, etc.? I'm just seeing that there's a comment from her. Screen is frozen. So it's on my side. Okay. I hope you can hear me now. Can you hear me now? Are we back? Jamila, are you back?
Yes, I can see you now. Can you see me?
Okay. Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so you've actually gone away off the screen now. You were there a moment ago. Okay, you're back. Anyway, so let's proceed. So in the first segment, it was about grit, right? And how we need to embody
Okay,
grit is through radical resilience, I would say. Where we in the grace aspects, it's about embodying radical empathy, kindness, love, and compassion, right? Because if we don't come from a heart-centered
correct.
space, and I see that Ashib has actually made a comment around heart-centered too. Practice being heart-centered along with mind-centered. More to come with inspiration or hope offerings, he says. Maria, Janice, Benoni, Latado, thank you so much for joining us here. We will acknowledge you as we go along. Jamila, can you still hear me? I just want to do a check to make sure.
Yes, I hear you. Gosh.
Hello.
Hi, I see you now.
I have no idea what's going on, but let's continue. Let's continue the conversation.
Yes.
So let's move into the conversation around the embodiment of radical empathy, kindness, compassion. And what are ways that you have done that for others in the midst of the tumultuous conflict or turmoil that you are in?
I think it's so important for us to find that within ourselves first and foremost, to be able to
Mhm.
offer it to anyone else. And I think, in a journey similar to our own, we're always so hard on ourselves. I remember when I first got divorced, I mean, the guilt that I felt every time I had to leave my child. Because you must understand, this is the first time now that um, I had to leave my son. My son was with me 24/7. And he was not used to being without me. And now I had to go to work. I had to go away on team building exercises over the weekends. And we moved to Johannesburg from Durban and we knew no one here. So there was no support structure. And it was just a very trying and challenging time for my son, who was 6 at the time, to be in this new place, a new environment, new school, without anybody that he knew. And also not having his mom present with him, for the entire day. So it was very difficult. And as I watched him battle with this new normal that was imposed on him, um,
Yes.
I beat myself up, on a daily basis. I was so unkind to myself. I was, you know filled with guilt and shame and selfish feelings towards myself for putting him through this, especially when the times were really difficult. Like, for example, when you're going through financial difficulties, where you
Mhm.
have no safety net, you literally just depending on yourself because there's nobody there um, to support you. You wonder and you think, have I done the right thing? Is this now coming from purely a selfish perspective? Am I only thinking of myself, and my child has got to now suffer the consequences of all of this here? So I was very unkind and hard on myself for many, many years, and
Mm.
that doesn't serve you at all, not in the least bit. So the minute that you are able to start giving yourself a break, and for you to have faith in knowing that, I made a conscious decision to the best of my knowledge and ability at the time and trust in myself to have made the right decision, then only are you able to shed that guilt,
Yeah,
to acknowledge the strength and the bravery that you have within yourself to have been able to undertake this. Um, and I think rediscovering who I am, by giving myself that acknowledgement, by accepting that I have a purpose in my life. So until you're able to do that for yourself and be kind to yourself, can you only then really truly begin to acknowledge or become aware of how you can offer this to someone else?
I agree, Jamila, because I beat myself up quite a bit when I made this decision because, as I said earlier on, I came from a broken home, right?
Yes,
So, and it was like I held on for dear life in a marriage that I had known probably, like you, probably the first 10 years I knew, hey, this is not really how it's supposed to go.
yeah,
But I stuck it out. I held on for dear life because I didn't want history to repeat itself. I didn't want my children to not grow up with their dad. So I almost recreated their storyline as if they were living mine, but they weren't, right?
mm,
They knew their dad. I don't know my dad, and my dad doesn't know exist, but they do know their dad. They
mm,
know their grandparents. And
mm,
I found it so hard to say, enough now. I pushed and wanted to make it work and wanted to make it work. And the guilt that I had to live through when I finally said, I can't anymore. I can't stay in a marriage where it is no longer serving me, it is depleting me. I wasn't this person that's sitting in front here right now with you, calm, balanced, and composed. I was an ugly person, and I'm willing to admit that quite openly on this
sure,
public forum across three platforms today, simply because that wounded part of me was showing up in, she was desperate, but she stayed. And so she accepted all types of things that she should never even have accepted. And when
yeah,
I finally said, okay, I'm going to do this, that guilt didn't stop there because now when I finally uncoupled and we went our separate ways, I could see what it was doing to my kids. Because
mm,
when you make a decision, a man or a woman, whether they make a decision they're going to leave, it's not overnight. They've been pondering this for years and years and years.
correct,
And then the one day it's just, okay, enough. I'm doing this. But as you say, the
yes,
kids, it is imposed onto them. And this wholesome togetherness or perceived wholesomeness in the marriage or the identity that is created out there that this is a good marriage and everything's working, not realizing how much suffering there was. You realize what, okay, are you going to constantly allow this to happen by you? Are you going to
yeah,
constantly co create this for yourself? Or are you going to step out of guilt, pain, shame, fear, all those very difficult dead zone emotions because I felt dead inside. I was
yes,
harsh, I was aggressive, I wasn't nurturing with my kids. My kids got to see a mom that was always in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And
mm,
how does that actually serve us and our kids for the greater good of their evolution? And I want to say this that it does serve them. So the gift and the opportunity from these experiences does help shape grace within our kids, grit within our kids, so that there isn't a repetitive intergenerational repeat of this sort of behaviors.
Yes.
And yeah, go for it. Please
You know,
respond.
I think also grace comes out of acknowledging what we get from a certain oppressive situation that we are in. For
Yeah.
example, I always wanted to please everyone else because I wanted to be this image of wholesomeness and goodness. And, you know, Jamila is so nice, Jamila is so accommodating, Jamila is this, Jamila is that. But that's my own ego as well, right? And
Yes.
the minute that you can acknowledge that within yourself and to understand and point it out to yourself that, you know what, let that pride go also. So
Mm-hmm.
what if you are not that to everybody? So what? So what if by making the decision to leave this marriage, you are seen as being unsuccessful, as being labeled as someone who didn't make a success of an important part of her life? So what?
Yeah.
And I had to accept that about myself and know that it's okay, because you can't be everything to everyone. You can't be on a high all the time. That is not what
Yeah.
life is about. It's about accepting, you know, the lows and the highs and the challenges and the failures, as well as the successes, and appreciating the failures within yourself. So I think it's very important for us to acknowledge that within ourselves, because that also then removes a lot of the aggressiveness, a lot of the bitterness, a lot of the anger that we feel within
Yes.
ourselves, by taking some sort of accountability for ourselves.
I think you're touching on to, I mean, I can't believe we have 8 minutes remaining. I know we've had a bit of technical
Oh,
difficulties. Hi, Ravindra. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate having you here. Um, let's move into the final part of the segment. Can you believe we're at the end around, I think you're touching
it's
now on integration. So all of these lived experiences,
yes.
all of these difficult grieving processes that we go through is in service to us and in service to those within our circle of influence. But how do you see the interplay between the grit, grace, and gratitude in achieving personal growth, success, and transformation?
You know, for me, Anisa, I feel like we need to acknowledge that this is a process that we go through, you know, and you're not going to get things right all the time. So we need to just be easy on ourselves, be kinder to ourselves. We need to acknowledge that, you know what, nothing comes without your commitment, your hard work, the mistakes that you're going to make, the failures that you will experience in your life. This is what life is all about. And we have to be able to learn from each failure that we encounter,
Yes.
supposed failure, I would say, because these are all
Yes.
learning curves for us, right? And I think understanding that and being resilient, making sure that it's positive resilience, right? That we should aspire towards, or we should acknowledge that we are going through. That resilience that is going to spur us forward into the next phase of our lives, um, into becoming that stronger individual that we know is within ourselves. Taking all of these experiences with grace, with gratitude, because you're not remaining stagnant. I believe that we in spiral dynamics, you know, and that we go through our lives going through similar experiences, but with a wealth of knowledge every time we pass by how we seemingly suppose is the same experience, or seemingly think that we are stagnating in our lives. We're not. Each time we're going around, we're going and moving forward and upwards. So we might experience similar things, but we're coming from it from a different perspective. with learnings that we have gathered through the journey. And I
Yeah,
think that if we can step out of the experience that we are having and observe, we will be able to see how much we have succeeded. And I think that it will place us in a space of gratitude for how far we've come along. Because I think we
yeah,
get so caught up in that hamster wheel of life that we fail to acknowledge how much we've actually achieved, how much we've actually grown. And I think one very important way of understanding this is looking at the people that you have around you and how it's changed over the years. I'm sure that you've experienced this because as you grow,
absolutely.
as you vibrate on that higher frequency, you shed a lot of the people that no longer fit into who Anissa is at this point in time.
Agreed.
And you start attracting more people who are beneficial to the state of consciousness and mindfulness that you are in at the time. And I believe that we are constantly growing, constantly learning. And that is the journey that we are on. There is no destination. And I think I've told you this, the minute that we feel that we have come to a point where we know everything,
Yes.
that is for me our last day. Because in this life, we are meant to be growing to reach that higher self that we were born to be.
Yeah.
So
I,
that for me is the path, and how this all ties in to our journey from grit, to grace, to gratitude.
I see there's another comment, Jamila. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. That was from Ashi. Pauline Chetty, thank you for joining us. Um, I think I missed the first part of your comment, but it is about constant evolving and shedding. And it's very difficult when you have some of these ways of being, this conditioning that is almost pathologized, right? It's innately how you respond. And rather not even respond, we tend to react and we don't respond.
Correct.
So from an integration perspective, I think it's very valuable to say that if we can cultivate curiosity to first seek to understand with no judgment what is showing up in our lives, why does it show up? What is it meant to serve us with? As you said, it's not a fail, it's a what do I learn from it? It's a life lesson. And the work that I do, I often speak about the hero's journey. And this is that call to adventure. And you are going to be faced with these experiences that is asking you to take heed. And you're
Mm.
either going to refuse it or the universe will just push you towards making that decision. But
Mm.
it's ultimately important it's to rewrite the narrative around it and not see this as being the victim, one. Two, to remain curious, to have empathy for yourself, for others in this process, and to also have gratitude. I think when we can embody gratitude, it's almost that ultimate state of in acceptance of whatever the ebbs and flows are in life. If the tide comes in, this too shall pass. It's knowing that we need to be seeing the impermanence of every experience, event, or situation, or how every person shows up in our lives and what they are meant to teach us. So I know that we are sort of almost at the end. I would like to um, kind of close off because we've got 2 minutes remaining. And maybe there's something, Jamila, you would like to share with the audience to say, what ways can these virtues collectively contribute to a more fulfilling and purposeful
I,
life?
I think one thing I just wanted to touch on, Anissa, is the importance of living your life without judgment for yourself and without judgment for anyone else. Because we truly cannot understand what anybody else is going through. And as painful as some relationships or situations may be, we don't truly understand, or we will never know what the other person is going through in their lives to make them react in the ways that they do. or to
Yes.
show up in the way that they do. We are on this journey of self-discovery. Not everyone is as fortunate to be on it. Not everyone is at the point that we are at right now. And we ourselves are not at an elevated point that others may be at. So it
Exactly.
is so important for us to go through this journey of life with as little judgment as we possibly can have. And like I say, and I emphasize this, for ourselves as well as for the next person.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to thank you, Jamila. This has been such an encouraging conversation, and I love the raw, real authenticity. For those that know, we don't have rehearsed conversations. I hate them. I think they are not.
Yes.
They're not bringing the essence of the story across all the lived experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I have to concur in a closing remark to say that we tend to sabotage ourselves with the judge, jury, executioner that we have within ourselves and the lens towards others. And if we can just remain in a state of curiosity, um, unconditional, the highest unconditional positive regard, first for ourselves and others, we will see the grace and gratitude, and then automatically, inadvertently, have grit to persevere and continue and forge ahead. So, for those that have been so engaging here today, I want to thank you for sharing part of your stories and your insights. We thank you. We would love to connect with those that would love to participate in this dialogue. We have space and we will be sharing a calendar, or you can get in touch with us and we can add you rather into the calendar.
Mm.
Thank you from my side, and we will be hosting this once a week. We were intending to. We will send out possibly a poll to see what day might work. Jamila was thinking on a Monday so that you can kickstart your week with grit, grace, and gratitude. I love that idea. Please share your insights on when you think it needs to be. Any more closing comments, Jamila, before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I just hope that everyone engages and takes the opportunity to join us in hosting this. You know, if we can get as many different perspectives on life and how best to make it an easier journey for all of us, I would really love for you all to participate.
Thank you. So, Jamila, you can stay on. I'm going to end live and say goodbye to our guest, and then you and I will stay and debrief after the
Sure.
session. Thanks so
Okay,
much. Bye,
fantastic.
everyone. Have
Thank
a
you,
good
everyone.
weekend.
Bye bye.